We weren't born farmers, but a passion for nutritious and delicious meals led us to growing our own food. Whether you're looking to start a backyard garden or learn how to use fresh produce in the kitchen, we are here to help you enjoy growing and preparing delicious garden fresh produce. Good evening, everyone. I'm Emily Forbes with the Forbes Family Farm, and tonight we are making pickles. Here in Northeast Utah, we are in the middle of the abundance of cucumbers, and so we are going to take a little bit of time to show you how to make fresh pack pickles. There are many different varieties of pickles. There are fermented pickles, there are quick refrigerator pickles, but the version that we are going to make here tonight uses a vinegar brine, and it actually allows you to make shelf stable pickles because we will be processing them in the water bath canner. So while the variety of pickles have their different benefits, this one is really helpful for us because then we can keep them down in our pantry, and we can actually just go grab a jar of pickles all throughout the winter when we want to have, a pickle spear with a hamburger or hot dog, or to chop up into relish. So there are a lot of different uses. It's definitely an item that our family uses a lot throughout the winter. So we're going to go over the process here, give you some tips and tricks along the way. An important note whenever you are canning is to make sure that you are following a trusted recipe. We want to really make sure that you are using safe practices to make sure that your family has food that is safe to eat throughout the year. So this particular recipe is coming from a book called Can It, that is again, a set of recipes that have been tested and are all safe to use. So we are going to start by using pickling cucumber. So when you are looking for the right variety of cucumber, it really does make a difference, because if you're using just a typical sweet cucumber or a slicing cucumber that you grab off a shelf in a store, it's not actually going to hold up very well to the pickling process. And so there are a lot of great varieties of pickling cucumbers to use. And it's really important, if at all possible, to get them fresh, either from your own garden or from a local farmer. Because in order to have the crispiest pickles, it's best to make them within 24 hours of them being picked. That will really allow all the nutrients to really remain in the cucumber, because that does start to degrade over time. So we have a great pickling cucumber here. For this particular recipe, we're going to make probably about 7 pint jars worth of pickles, because that's what fits into our water bath canner. And so generally it's about a pound of pickling cucumber per pint-sized jar. That's kind of a rough estimate. Again, follow the recipe. That's a good, safe, trusted recipe. So in order to cut them, what we find works best is to actually measure the size of cucumber that you need in your jar before you get started. So all of these jars are actually quite warm. We just pulled them out of the water bath canner. But in order to have the right amount of head space, so that's the space from the top of your vegetable or fruit to the top of the jar, we need about a 1/2 inch to make pickles, to make cucumber pickles. And so that's about 1/2 inch of head space right there. So I use this as my guide. So I cut one first, and that way I can just quickly and easily line up my next cucumber and get it chopped to the right space. And that way you're not trying to sit there and cram little pieces into a space. They will all just pack in quite easily. So there is an important element though in making your pickling cucumbers, to cut off the blossom end, because it does contain some enzymes that again will just kind of degrade the quality of your pickles over time. So I'm just gonna cut these up into spears here quickly, and we'll get those packed into our jars. So I find to pack your jars most efficiently to actually lay it on its side, because when you have it standing up, they kind of fall all over the place and it doesn't allow you to pack them quite as tightly. And again, if you're going to all the work to pack it and to can it, you might as well get as many in as you can. So in order to make our pickles here this evening, I've chopped up all of our other cucumbers. I cram in as many as I can. I think I can probably get one more in here. And then again, we're making sure that all of them are below that 1/2 inch of headspace that we need at the top. And then we take our pickling liquid, which is quite warm, so you bring it to a boil. And again, with this method of fresh pack pickling, we're using a vinegar and water solution. So for this particular recipe, it is 6 cups of water to 2.5 cups of distilled white vinegar. And while you can make your own vinegars, and we do that for different occasions, for the actual canning process, it's important to use an acid that is at 5% acid, to use a vinegar at 5% acid. And so I typically will use a store-bought vinegar for the actual pickling process when we're going to be using the water bath canner. And then we put some pickling spices in here. So this is the one area where you can actually have a little more flexibility and freedom to customize it based on your family's preferences. And so we just kind of put together a pickling spice mix based on what we had available and what we know our family likes. So we had some dill that we had dried from our gardens earlier this year. We put in some bay leaves, some coriander that we just harvested from our cilantro plants. We had some mustard seeds, some peppercorns, and I think and some kosher salts. That's the base of what we had here in our pickling liquid. So in order to pack your jars, you can either just ladle it straight in, or you can use a funnel. In this case, I'm probably just gonna actually ladle it straight into the jar. And again, you'll want to make sure that those cucumbers get submerged. So there you are. It only took 1 ladle. And then you want to make sure that you clean off the top, and that will allow the jar to get a really good clean seal. So it's important that when it's in the water bath canner, that the lid can seal really well. It is also important when you're canning to use a brand new lid. So you can reuse the jars, you can reuse the rings, but you always have to have a brand new lid in order to get that seal. So we'll put our new lid on and tighten it, and just hand tighten. You don't need to like sit here and crank on it. You really just need it kind of hand tightened. And then we'll actually put that into our water bath canner. So I'll finish filling up the rest, and then I'll show you what we'll do here with our water bath canner. All right, so once you have all of your jars packed and your water in your water bath canner has come to a boil, it's time to actually put the jars inside. So they sell these water bath canners at most grocery stores, hardware stores. You can find it on Amazon. But it is nice because it's a really big space, and typically you can fit about 7 jars in at a time. It is hot though when it is boiling, so make sure that you use an oven mitt or something. Okay, so we'll put our jars in, and I find the easiest way to pack it is to start by putting your jar in the middle first, and then put your jars on opposing sides. Because if you put them kind of just, in a circular motion, sometimes it'll actually tip this little wire rack over, which just means you have jars clanking around. It's not as convenient. Even now they might do it a little bit. Okay, so I've got all the jars in, and I will lower the rack, because you ideally want the jars to be covered by about 2 inches of water. So we're actually pretty good right here. Often what I'll do is I'll actually start a tea kettle with some water in it as well, so that way when I put it in, if I realize that I'm just a little bit shy of that 2 inches that I need, I can just put in a little extra boiling water and get it back up to temp pretty quickly. Because you don't actually start timing until it comes back to a boil. So even though it was at a boil before we put these in, because we've had the lid off and we're kind of putting new things in, it'll take a minute for it to come back up to temperature. So we'll put the lid back on, and we'll keep checking it, and as soon as it gets back to that big rolling boil, we'll go ahead and start our time. So for this recipe, it is a processing time of 15 minutes, but that's at sea level. And so because here we're at a much higher altitude, you do need to check different conversion charts to see how much additional time you need to add based on your elevation. So for us, we need to add an additional 10 minutes of processing time. So for these pint jars, it'll be 25 minutes. Again, but that time doesn't start until it gets back to a rolling boil. So we'll check back in here at the end. All right, so our timer just went off, so it's time to come get our jars out of our water bath canner. So again, this will be nice and hot, and all that steam will come out when you open it up. One really helpful tool to have when you're using water bath canner is this little jar lifter. I don't know if it has a more official term, but jar lifter. Because these jars obviously are in boiling water, so they're really warm, but it allows you to just simply pick it up. And then I always just put it on a towel next to the stove. That way it can just sit for a little bit. You'll start to hear overnight or within the next couple hours after processing all these little pops, and that's actually the jar sealing. So before you actually put your pickles on your shelf to wait and enjoy in the winter, you do want to check and make sure that all of them have actually sealed. So if you can depress it and then you hear it kind of make a noise as it goes up and down, you know that it has not sealed adequately. And if that's the case, no big deal, just stick them in your refrigerator, eat them over the next couple weeks, not a problem, but they will not last on your shelf if that if they have not actually sealed, if that's the case. One other quick note I wanted to point out is that as you're making your pickling brine, if you have some of the pickling brine left over, that is something that you can actually save. So I just poured all of mine into a quart jar. I'll label it as pickling vinegar, stick it in the fridge, because I know that I will be making some more pickles here in the coming days, and that just saves me one step. I already know that it's measured accurately, it has the right ratio of water to vinegar, so that's just one extra step, and then I'm not wasting any of those ingredients. So I hope this helped you gain a little confidence as you go about making some pickles with your fresh cucumbers, and then you can enjoy them all winter long. So enjoy.